everybody, and welcome to another installment of the Sofa Series Artist Spotlight. Today with me are two people, in case you couldn't tell for yourselves, one of whom is Michael Matsuno, a flutist, and the other of whom is Matthew Kline, a bassist. Yay! Welcome, welcome. So let's start. Let's start with you, Michael, and then you, Matthew. If you could give us all a little brief tour through your lives and how did you come to your instrument? How did you come to San Diego? Okay, go.
Okay. Wow. Okay, we're going all the way back. Well, thank you, Leslie, for having us, and thank you for this amazing project that you're doing.
Love it.
Oh gosh. Well, I started playing flute when I was 8 years old. Skip
ahead.
Yeah. So, I played classical flute in college, in high school. That was, I was a very sort of weird kid. Just kind of did one thing, played the flute, and I think I sort of had a change of heart when I was in college with the nature of what I wanted to do. Classical music, felt like it was kind of boxing me in. Didn't really give me creative agency, which is kind of funny because I'm now leaving UCSD and I'm kind of having that struggle all over again. What is creative agency and how, where do we look for that, especially when I think for what we do, we're in such a self-sustained economy. Anyway, so jumping back a little bit. So then I graduated from USC, and then I did my master's at UCSD, and now I just finished my doctorate degree, or I'm about to finish it.
Ooh, you're in the throes of dissertationing. Yay! Bless you for that. All right, Matt.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Leslie. This Project Blank, is fantastic, and it's such a wonderful thing for the San Diego community and other musicians. It's just awesome.
Thank you.
So just a little bit about me. I am originally from Houston, Texas, where I feel like I've actually been interested in contemporary music for most of my life. When the high school I went to was a performing arts high school. When I entered in there at 14 years old, I was in this thing called the Composition Club, where we would meet every week and do improvisations, and we would sit around listening to a new piece of music every week. So I remember the very first meeting, someone just put on this massive recording of Boulez, and that was like my introduction to new music, and I just kept on listening.
Oh my God, that explains so much about you. That's so cute. That's amazing. What an amazing school. Shout out to your teachers at your high school. Oh my God.
It's the same school Beyonce went to.
Oh, well then.
Do you think she took that class too?
Probably not. All the teachers
never know.
As Miss Knowles, and that Miss Knowles was a great student.
Yeah.
But they also said there were a lot of camera crews coming through at that time.
God. Sounds annoying.
But yeah, and then I went to Baylor, where I was a composition major, and then eventually I came to UCSD, where I inevitably ran into the path of Michael Matsuno.
I know, you guys met and it was kismet, and a musical best friendship has been born and nurtured. Well, I want to talk. So you brought it up, Michael, the notion of agency in music, and I'm finding in this conversation with all of us who do contemporary music, and not everybody on the series is a contemporary music lane driver, and so. What do you mean, Michael, when you're talking about musics that give you more agency, or musics that give you a little bit more freedom than maybe perhaps sitting in playing symphonic flute?
Yeah, let me see if I can give a simple answer to that. I'm having a hard time simple answers these days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think on the one hand, there's an agency of listening, where, if you're listening to Boulez in high school and that does something really special for you, I mean, for me, it was Messiaen and then it was Ligeti, that just like, I don't know, like it pulled my mind apart from the inside out, like I feel like as performers, we don't, well, as listeners, I don't feel like we always get to, well, when we listen to music, we engage with those things privately and personally. But when we perform that kind of music, we're kind of at the mercy of the programmers or the series who make those things happen. It's kind of hard as a musician to get to choose when and what you play, which is something, a gift I think we have at UCSD. But then even more personally, it's like once you, I feel like as a musician, I'm just reaching a point where I'm just mature enough to translate those interests that have always been in my head into some creative synthesis, something that I'm making, and to take what I want to hear and make it a reality. So I guess what I mean is, what I mean by agency is the ability to make what we want to hear, make the things that we want to listen to. Sometimes that is restricted, again, like I was saying, by the economy, by a pandemic, So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about what you want to hear. So, what do you want to hear, Matt Kline?
What do I want to hear?
Yeah.
Great question.
That's so loaded.
Well, I guess just to kind of start pointing toward Jörg Frey, it was kind of no accident that Michael and I picked this composer to play. Jörg has just been a really important composer for me for the last 4 or 5 years. I was just introduced to Jörg and the larger group of Vondelweiter composers that he's part of through the new violin professor Eric Carlson, who's great and a complete weirdo. And he played, he did a concert with all of Jörg's string quartets on one concert, and it really just blew my mind with the kind of just listening experience that I had. And then later started playing his music, and I realized it was just a really unique experience where I felt it was just going back to kind of what Michael was saying about agency and music. I just the experience of playing his music and a couple other composers similar to him was this very profound personal space that was created, where I felt like I was able to make music like that was like in dialogue with myself, as opposed to trying to make music where you're just trying to project something and you're trying to push something out into the audience. And I feel like I have this responsibility to like make something definitive, and the audience is going to sit here and listen to it. It was just another experience where I feel like I'm doing this very private act that the audience then is just privileged to watch.
Yeah.
And that was and
but also in music's like this. So to be honest, I hadn't actually he had never crossed my path, his music. So I started diving into it, and I haven't had the privilege of listening to it live. And even in the mediated recording, there's still something about it that seems very it seems very visceral, as the sounds are the sound waves are like literally washing out from the speakers onto me. That you can like feel it vibrate in really interesting ways. So maybe you guys can talk a little bit about that, because there's something that is acoustically magical about close music, really nestled in their musics. So yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's I totally agree with that observation. I'm so glad that you were able to hear that. And yeah, I don't know that he is, not that, you refine, you restrict yourself to vocal music, Leslie, but I don't, I can't think of vocal music that he's written.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Oh, he does?
when I think,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh,
It's really beautiful.
oh, well then.
I mean, I was not actually at this infamous string quartet performance, and I wish I had been. But I mean, I can't think. I want to name the performers, but I won't. But I can think of several performances of his that just like were so outstanding in my memory, and I feel like a lot of it has to do with his. And this is, I think, something Matt and I probably want to talk about with this piece in particular, is his use of harmony and his use of rhythm, which are very. I mean, I don't want to mischaracterize his work, but it does kind of make me think of like what Parrot or like the Holy Minimalists were doing, but kind of on a more extreme level. And I think that there's a totally different intentionality in the music, but this same kind of striking romantic beauty to his music. But it's almost as if like you took the facade of a Bruckner symphony, which is already a castle, and you look right up against the wall, and you were just looking at the grains of sandstone. It still has this sort of monumentality, or this sort of like almost like monolithic approach to harmony, because he uses these scales, these harmonic forms that are actually traceable and very minimal. But again, as you were saying, it's kind of about the surface and the texture and the presence of living in the moment of the music. So with this piece, and I'll turn it over to Matt, there's some really interesting things about the rhythmic pacing that when we worked with Jörg, he had some like really beautiful things to say about how they work.
How does he refer to time, Matt?
Oh, yeah, for him, that's a really
You got this.
question. Out of
I mean, let's talk about your beautiful description about it's like the Bruckner Castle, but it's zoomed into like the grain. I mean, well done. That's it. That is nice. Go on. Time. We're talking about time.
Yeah, no, Jörg, it's he's very similar to a lot of the Vondelweiser composers, where he's using a lot of silence and the kind of sparse ideas that get translated over a long period of time. But unlike a lot of the Vondelweiser composers, he really deals with actually very strict notation of how this time is communicated, where maybe the other composers are in a much more loose kind of landscape that they're working with. And so one of his kind of most famous pieces that was a turning point for him was the Wind series of instrumental works that we actually did an all-day performance of this many years ago at the Bread and Salt Silo. Morning till night, we did these collection of pieces, which there are 59 of them, and so over about 12 hours, I think we did 10 of them. So that gives you an idea how long it is.
Yeah.
But he deals with these kind of these cycles of repetition where you'll write one very isolated static sound, and then you'll have maybe 3 minutes of silence. The audience just kind of sits there in this both static but also visceral moment of silence, and the sound comes in after 3 minutes, and then the next silence is going to be 6 minutes. The sound comes in, and so for me, it's a lot about he's dealing with this kind of incremental change over time. And so in the piece, the duo that we have, it's very interesting that you have these long, these kind of repeating back and forth, but then it's not until about 10 minutes in that you get your first moment of silence. But that moment of rest is a really loud moment that happens. And it's a really beautiful thing after this kind of repetitive structure that happens.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I mean, like, apart from I guess I don't know. It's just like how did you all come to the this kind of slow moving music? Because it feels like I don't know. It feels like we've all sort of confronted our virtuosity at some point, the sort of flamboyant virtuosity that is drilled into us in the conservatory track, right? But I think I talked about this with Todd too, that it was like that this is a different type of virtuosity. It's just not so outwardly, it's not
Yeah.
full of flair, right? So, how do you guys deal with that amount of nothing, right? That
Mhm.
it seems almost like it's not about all the notes, it's not about the louds, it's not about all the other things, the sort of decorative elements that some people seem to really love in music. How do you guys respond to that level of almost like, does it feel restrictive? Does it feel freeing to do so little? What does that mean to you? How did you come to this?
Well, I actually think that there is a virtuosity in playing the kinds of piece that we play that's really akin to playing Feldman
Mm-hmm.
technically, which it might not be a lot in terms of the rapid cycling of events, but to sustain a note takes rapid cycling of support and physical relaxation and ear training and like and so yeah, it is extremely difficult to play precisely, but also like conveying sort of sense of relaxation. And it's funny that Matt, you took it in the opposite direction that I thought you were going to take it in, because there's this. I mean, I don't want to like pull back the curtain too much with your considering. I think the interesting dichotomy with the way Matt and I work is I'm very literal, and Matt is much more imaginative and free and chaotic. So I don't want to like
What?
please shut
No.
me up if I'm giving too much away. Like Nord, when he described, I mean, I don't know that this is true of all of his music, but he works with simple rhythmic units. And I think that that's for a reason, because he talks about the meaning or the meanings of a quarter note or a half note or a dotted half note or a whole note, which, you know, are,
That's it.
are, are basic building blocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your your castle wall. But when he described the way he put them together in this ensemble piece that we played, and I'll never forget. Alec had a piano solo in it. That combined half notes and dotted notes. He described it like flying, and you have to have actually a very strict sense and a very clear sense of pulse. Again, sort of in much the same way you play Feldman. If you're lazy about it, if you're not really holding on in a very intentional way, it really kind of pulls apart.
Mm.
And with phrase music, I think especially the piece we played, with playing half note, half note, half note at like 52 quarter note is a very particular sense, and it usually is felt in sort of a Gogic up and down. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and again, that kind of is a very romantic idea to me. But you were asking about virtuosity, and I feel like that kind of that itself is really it's really hard and really challenging and really and when it works, it's really. I mean, like I've cried. I can tell you, I've cried in 3 performances of this music, like just wept like a baby. And I really think that kind of interpretation is what, like a focus on those elements is really what's necessary, not just like okay, we'll play what's on the page and be cagey about it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I don't know if that was a question.
Yeah. Do you wanna add anything to that, Matt?
Yeah. No, that was great, and I think um, going back to the kind of the simplistic rhythms, how kind of difficult they are to really hold on to and be consistent with. I know he uses the tempo marking quarter note equals 48 a lot, and that is a really hard tempo. You either are going to go too fast or too slow, but
Oh
you're
yeah.
just right, and you have to keep quarter note equals 48 over the span of 16 minutes.
Is this conducted?
No, this like I'm thinking of a solo bass piece right
Oh,
now,
okay.
and
But
like
even still with that, it needs to be pretty.
right, it has to be
Oh my God.
very, very precise. And when I've worked with him, it's very insistent that the tempo keep this feeling. Not that it's rigid, but it keeps this, you know, very the sense of like structure underneath. Even when it, there's going to be like 6 beats of rest, 4 beats of rest, 5 beats of rest. This has to be very consistent. And yeah, and then the kind of virtuosity with what I would call the monochromatic tone, which you would find in like Feldman and other repertoire, is keeping that very pure and consistent. That's a very difficult thing. It highlights the relationship of the pitches and the timbre itself.
Do you ever find yourself like, I mean, I'm just trying to think of like just technique nerd things like, so like, oh shit, my bow is gonna hit at like, do you ever do you fuss a little bit about it, precisely the attack of the note, like little teeny tiny technique things, even for such a skilled players as you are? Do you still consider your rudiments?
Oh, I think I overthink my rudiments.
Yeah.
All we think about, and it becomes obsessive, but kind of delightful at the same time.
Yeah.
I will say with a little bit with Jörg's music, but especially some of the other Vondelweiser composers, one of the things that I kind of get a joy out of on a technical level is how it pushes you to play as soft as possible, but really, really understand what like that even means. It's not just like playing less, but it's like every
It's
time
intense. Yeah, it's like I don't think people quite realize that playing softly, singing softly, it is the hardest fucking thing. It is hard, super hard, because you have to keep the intensity and core to the tone, and you have to make decisions about, I guess in our case, Michael, that how much air to core center, tone center there is, and you have to like do this game of ratios. And then when I'm given something that says like 4 Ps, it's like I spend like all my time practicing soft. The louds make sense. I get it. It feels a certain way on it. I get it. But to me, it's you get to the point where it's like, okay, I gotta like release the straitjacket and find a way to settle into a soft that doesn't feel withheld, right? That it doesn't feel like you're really holding your body back. It still has to feel engaged and intense.
right. It's no, yeah, especially for singers. I know
It's hard.
yeah, I'm playing a Vondelweiser
Singing is hard.
and it's very hard to hum that softly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But every time I've worked with Jörg, every session, I swear, like I'll be playing as soft as I can, and then he'd be like, "Yeah, so I think you can play softer." And then we'll work on it for 5 minutes, and he'll literally just half my volume from whatever it was before, and I go, "Oh, I guess I could play softer." But it gets to this almost like just crazy level of like where the hair is barely touching the string, and it sounds like an echo of an overtone. And it's
Oh my God.
so, and then you really start, and that's what's kind of special about even the recording we did, because Michael has these, pure tones, but over time, I'm just bowing the side of my bass. The bass starts to produce its own pitches. Start to hear it. You're just getting quieter and quieter and quieter, and it's really beautiful.
I love that. Does he sort of take into account the noise, like the actual noise of the bow hairs against the object, or the noise of the breath against the lip of the flute? I mean, does he consider those as part of the sound world, or is he trying to minimize those?
Well, I guess I'll just go ahead if Michael wants to join in on for this piece. Not really, because I guess we should have started by saying the piece that we played is actually an open instrumentation score. Just for any instrument that can play a pitch and any instrument that can play non-pitch sounds.
Okay.
And so actually the instructions are fairly simple. And so, but like, I think just the premise allows you to start exploring those ideas.
But that's again what I think draws it away from Cage for me, even though it has this really obvious connection to silence and
Mm-hmm.
to presence. But in, well, okay, I don't, I feel like I'm embarrassing myself. Like if someone knows way more about Cage than I do, which is most people. I don't know if this is completely true, but I, if this dialectic against Cage is entirely true. But with Frey, I feel like, or with a lot of the Bonnell by figures, it's not so much instruction following as it is like, uh, I don't know how to put this. Like, to put it really bluntly, there's a huge element of taste and construction, right? So like, I think he's definitely like wants those like the, you know, all of the beautiful sounds, the beautiful idiosyncrasies to like sparkle and to be there and to be present. But like how you manage that can be like, again, can kind of like really work and then kind of really not work, you know? So I don't think he's like air sound is good, but like it's kind of up to you to say, okay, I have a whole note and it has to be extremely quiet and it's this composite sound. So air is suddenly, as opposed to being a deficit in your playing, it's suddenly like a tool and a
Hmm.
really exciting tool. Is that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you
Yeah.
have like kind of a more, I guess, a broader tone color palette, right? That you get to really really explore the all the different elements of the sound making device that you're playing. I mean, I think um, down to the fact that it is just breath for you. It's just breath. You know, it's hair scraping across
Yeah.
a wire, you know? That's what it is. And that's like that's part of it. It can make these, you know, like romantic noises. It can make really hideous noises. It can make really simple sound. You know, I think that's cool that it can kind of like you just burst open the spectrum a little bit of what this your sound can be. What does a flute sound like? What does a bass sound like? I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a
Exactly.
question. I have a question about this is something that I consider a lot, and I have not yet asked this of any of our contemporary nerds. Do you guys consider accessibility? And like, do people need to know all of the details of the 20th century musical history leading up to Jurg to get it or to appreciate it? Or do you feel like it's that accessibility is something you consider in your programming? Yeah, I don't know. This is a very open, very complex topic, but I haven't really talked about it yet, and I thought you two were the perfect people to do it with. So,
But just to be clear, when you say accessibility, you're like, you're not, are you thinking about, we're not thinking about politics of like, a, you know, ability and people being able to attend a concert, for example, or
no, no,
okay,
meaning like people, maybe like a lay person audience, you know,
yeah,
if they're just sort of wandering into the concert hall and they sit to, and the first thing that they hear is a piece by Jurg.
okay.
Is it something that that you feel people can chew on? I mean, I personally believe that yes, but but it's like I don't know. I get asked this question a lot, especially by people who do not do contemporary music.
Mhm.
They're like, well, I just don't get it. It's like, well, I don't. I think you could get it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not really wording a real question here. But I mean, is your phrase music? Do you find it? I mean, you find it to be. It speaks to you. Do you think it can speak to an audience of not contemporary music nerds?
Hmm.
That's a question.
Yeah, way to stump us there.
I'm sorry.
Well, okay, Matt, you, no, you go.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. It's
It's
a tough
heavy.
question. I would say whether I say yes or no. I think for me, one thing that's very interesting about Jörg's music, and even some composer I'm just thinking a lot about these days, Eva Maria Huben. She's someone that's all this linked with her, with Jörg as well. Their music to me falls into what I would call just a musical practice, where they create these scores that really highlight and almost an offering to the performers to engage into this practice that is that I think can really be heard and understood by the audience. And so it's just this act that allows the performers to engage in a dialogue with one another and create something between us. So when Michael and I play this music, I think it can readily be heard, just the almost very blatant relationship that's going back and forth between me and him. So he's playing a pitch, I play a non-pitch sound, but that has a kind of homogenous sound to it, and it just keeps going back and forth. And so even if you're a listener that isn't saying like, okay, I don't really understand the musical structure and how this links into some kind of complex thing, I think you can immediately recognize just the act that the performers are doing. That there is this kind of intentional just practice that we're engaging with each other and going back and forth. And I think there's something very special about it that happens, and we kind of lose ourselves in this relationship that we're trying to just constantly negotiate sound between one another. And the sounds themselves are very defined and very very clear. So I would say, in a sense, it's very accessible because just the kind of act and practice that we're entering into, I think, is very clear. Something very personal and something very unique.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe the real question is then it's like it's about listening, right? Like how do we listen to when we're calling something music, and I think sometimes we want to listen for structure and we want to listen for melodic material, but it's like melody is just a sequence of notes. That's all it is, right? And so I think that it's a matter of I don't know, maybe sort of knowing that when you go into something that you are there to just sort of like, I don't know, it feels like a bath. It's like you just sort of soak in this beautiful, like, swirling timbral thing. It's like, to me, it's very, very, very engaging, and of course I would agree that it is very accessible, but maybe it's a question of like listening. So did you ever come to a point where you started to listen differently to concerts, and was it an easy shift going from like okay, we have a theme, a development, and exposition, all of that sort of structural listening, to just sort of like durational, we're just going to kind of sit and experience maybe one kind of sound for a longer period of time? Was that something that that came easily to you, Michael?
Yeah, well, let me try to actually get to that via taking a crack at the previous question.
Okay.
Because I still think that really is a really relevant question and a really great one, and one that we should hold ourselves up the fire to try to answer. I'm personally okay with there not being a clear answer, or that being a known unknown. Like, is this accessible to people? Could a person sit down in an audience and just simply enjoy it? And I don't know. I mean, I don't actually want to answer for people who, might have different experiences, who different music familiarity, completely different musical background than I do, that this might not speak to them at all. And I don't want to invalidate that by saying that, like, this is music that is like has a pure essence that one should grasp. I think it's perfectly fine that someone is completely perplexed. But I do think that, like, what's interesting, I think the first thing that came to mind when you answered this question, asked the question, was about the rules, the perceived rules of the concert performance experience, how those can be subverted, what those mean, and like why we have those in place in the first place. And the interesting thing about Vondelweiser is often we actually associate it with experimenting with moving away from the concert hall, questioning what a performance space is, right? And like how we can be intimate when we hear music. And I do think that like not I feel like this is both an elitist idea and an anti-elitist idea, which is that I also think that it's okay for us to be comfortable with the idea that we invite people in to the music, that maybe there isn't something pure on the surface that everyone could get or the masses could understand, but that we could bring people into our living room, even if it's like 3 or 4 people, and share with them why this is so profound. And then to get to the question that you had, you know, I I like to be really open and vulnerable. So I'll just say that like when I first heard Matt play this music, it for various reasons in our lives and for various things that were happening in our lives, that was a life-changing experience, like no other music listening has ever been for me. And so, I mean, I wasn't really sold on the music actually right away. Like it took me a long time to really get into it in the way that like Matt was crazy nuts about it from the beginning. But it had something to do with, I think, some of the core values of the music, which is about understanding on a sort of unintellectual level, on a different level, what it means to be present with a person and why that's so important. And if I could just keep talking, I want to connect it to one other thing that I really want to make sure to mention, which is something that Matt and I said we wouldn't tell anyone, which is that he actually snuck over to my house to record this. So he lives 2 blocks away. He lives a block away. And, you know, I see this annoying creature every single day. We went on a 5-hour walk the other day. So we're very close. I see him every day. And it was about a week ago. I'll shut up really soon, but it was about a week ago. We were supposed to give a huge concert together. We commissioned a piece by Wolfgang von Schweinitz, who is the senior faculty at CalArts, who writes in Extended Dust Information, and he wrote us just this beautiful, sweet concertino for flute and double bass and brass. And we put in about 15, 16 hours of rehearsal into it. And Todd and I were going to play a piece. And of course that got canceled. So it was, when he came over to play, it was like, I can't explain it. It was like we had been thinking about, like this idea of like making music together had been so, I don't know, like inside of us. And then when we did it, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but it was so special and it was so important. And I think, yeah, just to close like with this idea of this particular music, when it's understood and when it works, I think really connects the person to the present, to the people present in the room. And so again, with accessibility, I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing a person into that space. Mm-hmm. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't,
they don't. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's like we're all to talk about, oh my God, about the sort of like the loss of community and the loss of that kind of public and even just sort of private engagement that we maybe had taken for granted, that it would have been no big deal for one of us to just go over to somebody's house and just hang out and make music, or just like chill in a practice room for however many hours and workshop and get really woodshed a piece. And we can't really do that, you know, and that the sort of that, I don't know, I felt in starting the Sofa series. Okay, so the main objective is to raise money for everybody whose gigs were immediately like we had the rug pulled out from under us, but just to keep making some music, man. I didn't. I took about a month where it was just like, oh God, I can't. Everything is horrible. The world is horrible. The future sucks. I hate everything. And then I had to crawl out myself to find these spaces that I could create again. I could make music. I could make music communally, which I think is super duper important for us, for our people. And yeah, so I think it speaks to this time it speaks to this weirdness going on where it's like, I don't know, everything is just feels gone, but it's not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that we just have to find ways to keep together and keep making sounds together, even though you sort of illegally broke quarantine.
Hmm.
I'm gonna tell the governor. Are you fine?
You know, if somehow that got Gavin Newsom to listen to Jörg Frey, I think it'd be worth it.
that's the that's the uptick, right? Wait, so talk. What is okay? You keep saying I know what Wandelweiser is, but maybe for the people, what is Wandelweiser?
Vondelweiser is was just it's a group of composers that are mainly based in Europe. It was formed in the early '90s by Antoine Boiger, and other composers joined in. The American composer that everyone knows is Michael Matsuno, up in LA. But early in the '90s, they were just interested in dealing with works that investigated how silence can be integrated into music in a particular compositional way. And so a lot of their early works were very austere and pretty extreme. You'd have works that would go for, 16 hours, and performers would make one sound every 45 minutes or something.
Oh my God.
Some really, really extreme things that go beyond concert music, and there are these events, and
Yeah.
people with their sleeping bags, and they go through my brother thinks it sounds like military grade psychological warfare, but that's
Some of us are into that, okay?
We'll have,
Yeah.
fetishes.
Come
It's
see.
some weird branch of Raytheon through UCSD.
Right. There's not really any kind of dogma behind Vondelweiser or anything. It was just a group of composers that really were sympathetic to one another and liked performing each other's works. They just hold these events where all of them were just performing each other's works and doing these things. And right now it's, Antoine just helps promote each of their works and has a beautiful website. But there's still that kind of consistency of coming from Cage and Christian Wolff and dealing with, long, quiet pieces that deal with silence. And I feel like an interesting attribute is almost none of them ever write crescendos. I never see a crescendo in any of their music. I think Ava Maria has published over 340 works, and I think I found a crescendo in maybe 2 of the pieces.
Why? Of course you know that, though, Matt.
That's literally his dissertation.
Oh, there it is. But that speaks to what you're talking about this notion of community that like I don't think there's these storied events of the French Salon, which would be this great you fill an entire house floor to ceiling with everybody who has a painting. Come in and put your painting up on the wall, and we'll do some concerts. We're gonna read through some Debussy. It's like these things, these happenings that were happenings before that there were actually happenings in the 70s. Like these communities. Just exist, and it's nice to know that, like, first of all, they named themselves, which is beautiful, and that it's still going, right?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, classical concert spaces don't feel like sacred spaces as much anymore.
Yeah.
Or like just to like drift aimlessly on that thought. The space making of salon culture, as we were mentioning. It's like, what I just don't feel like we walk away with that as often in a concert hall. I mean, I don't want to take away from it, because I've been thinking a lot about my first concert for some random reason in a concert hall for me as a kid, and I think that I think for newcomers it's mind blowing. I think we get I think that's partly our getting bored of it, maybe. But like, it does feel like concert halls kind of take the ritual out of it a little bit, or like make it more of
Make it more what? I'm sorry, what was the last bit?
like a capitalist thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is you. I think the word that you said it, it's sacred, right? It's like it's.
Mhm.
I always and for anybody who wants some good reading on the music and concert hall experience, go read Musicking by Christopher
Oh,
Smalls. You know, just talks about this very thing that it's like it's this ritual thing. We go in, we pay our ticket, we get our seat, and then we're expected to behave ourselves. Now everybody's confronting this. Everybody's thinking about this. It's like, well, what does it mean to go to a concert anymore? Is it because I really needed to see that I needed to hear the Eroica Symphony one more time, or is it a social thing? And I don't know. I'm always kind of leaning more towards it's always a social thing. You go to hang out with people to experience something communally, even if it's with 3,000 of your closest friends, or just five of your closest friends. So I don't know. I think I'm not saying that this going to the symphony is all bad. I think it can be like kind of this beautiful, charming, like magical. It feels kind of like a fairy tale. It doesn't feel so. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling now.
yeah, it's such a it's a whole world of a
Look at
discussion,
it.
right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, I am of the opinion that like the conversation has been foisted onto orchestras unnecessarily. Like I feel like a few decades ago they existed and it was fine and they sustained themselves and people could make a living. But it's extremely hard to make a living as a musician now,
Yeah.
and that in turn makes it so those orchestras have to question their relevancy. But it's like I think that there are inherent, or actually I've been people have questioned my use of the word inherent, but I wouldn't say inherent. I just think that like the nerd, the 10-year-old nerd, I want him or her or them to be able to go see the Eroica Symphony, even if
Yeah.
it's not like the thing that is the most relevant to our daily lives. Like
Right.
I think that would be great. Or if not the Eroica Symphony, a Florence Price Symphony. You know what I mean? So it feels like a conversation that's been foisted on orchestras and because of
And opera
our precarious
companies, they're
economy.
they're dealing with it. They
Yeah.
specifically, our opera company here, they've been dealing with it with audiences and yeah, just sort of who's coming to these things anymore. Sorry, what were you going to say, Matt?
Oh, just a this is kind of a tangent, but also foisted is a good word.
Foisted,
It is a
I
great
like
word.
that word.
Foisted.
foisted.
Just to go back to kind of the different the spaces. One thing that I really like to do, and I know Michael has been at this, is I host these house concerts at my apartment that are specifically the whole premise of it is we perform like one or two long Vondel Weiser works,
Uh,
and then invite like 10 people over, but every person at the house concert has to be drinking a glass of scotch.
great.
So, and
So many
so,
rules.
yeah,
God.
I like this interactive thing of everyone is like something tactile they're doing while we're going through this long process.
Yeah. Aw.
Yeah. So
It's like the
anyway,
cutest, geekiest thing ever. Are you still having these? You can still do them, via Zoom, for
but
example.
yes, and everyone has to put a glass of scotch. That would be
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Well, tell me when your next one is. I'll be there with scotch in hand. All right, well,
Yeah.
darlings, thank you so very much for joining me on this wonderful, perfect San Diego afternoon. It was a joy to talk with you both about really complicated things. That's just how I roll. These days, anyway. Most of the times it's just about drag queens, usually. Which maybe the next time we can just talk about drag queens. But thank you both so much for joining me and for playing and for sharing the Jörg Frey with our audience. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the amazing conversation. It's great.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
awesome.
All right, thank you all, and tune in again.